everyone, and thank you for tuning into this edition of Reporter's Notebook. Happy Tuesday! Woo-hoo! Monday is behind us, and today I have with me my featured guest for Tuesdays, Miss Emily Severich. Hi, Emily. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm pumped because first of all, we're recording this in the morning, so I still have the caffeine just pumping in me.
Yes.
And number two, we just finished recording our podcast.
Yes.
And you can hear the squeaky chair, and that our listeners can hear the squeaky chair that's in the studio right now. That's okay. I'll try sitting still. But the caffeine's still running through me, so I don't know if it'll happen. Emily, do you want to tell our listeners or watchers what our podcast was about today and what was different about it?
Yeah, so today's podcast, we did something a little different. We were kind of testing out, I guess you could say, a new feature. A lot of people, podcasters will add a video component to their podcast. So we tested that out today with our podcast guests. We did a Zoom call, so there will be a video element for you guys to check out. So we're super excited to kind of roll that feature out. But today we were joined by Marshall Kolslov. I'm going to say his last name incorrectly, so I apologize, which I should be better at saying people's last names that are tricky because mine's so difficult, so I don't know, but...
That's funny that you say that because every time that I want to introduce you, when I'm like, Emily Severich, I'm like, am I saying it correctly? Like right now, Like 2 seconds ago, I was like, and welcome Emily Severich, and I was like, I hope that's correct because that's what I've been saying.
Right, this should be a talent that I have. Apparently I don't have it, but so he joined us as our special guest today, and he actually runs his own podcast called The Realignment, which is kind of the perfect name for what we talked about today during our podcast. His whole goal of his podcast is kind of to help people figure out different perspectives on almost, he kind of phrased it as the way out of, the political climate or the issues that we're dealing with now, how to kind of figure out pathways out of that in really intelligent and thought out ways within the political parties. So I thought it was a great podcast. He gave us a lot of awesome tips and tricks about being podcasters, which was really cool just to get his perspective on that. We talked about that a little bit after the podcast ended. But yeah, I think it was a great conversation. I think some of mine, I don't know about you, Victoria, I think some of my favorite podcast conversations that we have are just those really candid ones about talking about, what are your feelings about the political climate that we're in? How do you feel about the divide in the parties? How can we kind of bridge those gaps, figure that out a little bit more as we head into the future. So I thought it was a great convo.
He's young. So yeah. He's 29, but he's talked with just as much as we've done this political podcast where we talk with like experts and authors and policymakers, lawmakers. He's talked with a variety of guests and experts himself. He said that he did 160 episodes of his Realignment podcast. But besides that, he also had a fellowship at a policy think tank kind of institute called the Hudson Institute. Mm-hmm. And he's also been involved with PBS. I believe it's Firing Line. I think that's the name of the segment or the show for that organization. But so I mean, besides him being a host of this kind of like podcast, he also has his own foot in the game. I don't know. I don't want to say foot in the game because he's not trying to influence like policy, but he has that background where he understands and knows what the steps are, behind the scenes kind of look. Were you nervous about doing the video element?
I was a little nervous. I'm not going to lie to you, because normally our podcast days are a little more relaxed. We kind of come in with our blankets on and we have our coffee and we're just kind of like snuggled up and having these awesome conversations. But so today was a little more pressure, it felt like. Of course, we're used to being on camera every single day anyway for our jobs. But yeah, it was kind of a little nerve-wracking, if I'm being honest.
It's a little different because we pre-record our intro and our outro because we pre-record our intro and we pre-record our outro after the conversation is finished so that we can kind of get an idea of what we talked about and just wrap it up and introduce what's happening and all that stuff. But this time we had to go all in one go. And it was nerve-wracking because we couldn't, since I did the introduction, I couldn't figure out a way to go into the topic about what we talked about. So it was kind of like, we're doing a video element. So for our listeners, if you want to check out the video, go to the article that it's attached to on our website at WNCT.com. And then we just went right into our conversation. And then also, were you nervous interviewing someone who does podcasting like for a living?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, You guys will hear our guest talk, Marshall. He's a very, very intelligent guest. He has a lot of opinions and thoughts about, the political scope that we're dealing with right now. And he gave a lot of really awesome information and a really great, I think, anecdotes to a lot of these situations that we're dealing with. So having him it was definitely a little nerve-wracking, but like I said, he gave us some really great tips and tricks after the podcast ended, just kind of chatted with us for a little bit. So that was super awesome because, we're all kind of in the same sort of industry, same sort of business. So to get, tips and feedback from other people is really, really awesome and helpful.
It's always much needed, especially since I just came up on a year of being here at WNCT, and Emily, you're not far ahead of me. You're what, a year?
Like a year and a half, a little bit,
just a couple months. So it's always nice when we get people who understand what's going on. If they're like, let me help you, do this or do that.
Please help us.
But at the same time, we do have an amazing team, and Emily, I love doing the podcast with you. It's just awesome. And so besides the podcast, there's also a couple things that we do differently when we record these podcasts on our in-house and studio days. What do you have anything else planned for the day that you're working on? I saw in Daybooks that you have a few a snackable, and do you want to explain what a snackable, why we call it a snackable and what it is?
So we do these things called snackables as digital reporters, and we kind of put one out, or we try to put one out at least every day that we're reporting, and it's basically just kind of like a short, usually 30 seconds to maybe a minute video with some music to it. And it's basically just some either photos or videos with some captions on it, kind of explaining, an event going on or a situation that happens, sort of like a quick little snippet of something that's happening. And we'll post that so that, people can have a video component to watch while getting some, accurate information as well. So I'll be putting one of those together today on something that's happening this week, as well as I will also be going to, I'm going to blank on the name, the Jolly Roger, ECU's new campus, off-campus living residents. They are doing their grand opening today. There's going to be ribbon cutting, and I believe it's on Charles Boulevard, so I'll be going to check that out today as well. I think that's like the new apartment complex that's supposed to have that rooftop pool that's supposed to be super awesome. So I'm really interested to go check this out. I went to ECU, so it's kind of cool to see some of the buildings that they're continuing to get out there.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'm excited to see what that's going to look like, whatever it is, because I saw it in Daybook and I was like, and our planner that we have here at the studio, and I was like, this looks kind of interesting. So even though we do tend to get cozy when we record our podcast, right after we have work, and even our podcast guest was like, because we said, we record and then we turn it around the same day, we push it out the same day, and he was like, oh wow. We're like, yeah, that's something that as part of local news reporters, we try to push content that is valuable and meaningful as soon as possible, and then find even more, not even more valuable content, but new content, every day, because there's always something going on at ENC.
Oh yeah, we're working hard for you guys.
That's true. Excuse me. All right, everyone. Well, I think that was, our cue to end it here. Thank you so much, Emily, for joining us on this edition of Reporter's Notebook. I hope everyone has a wonderful week.